Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise. We bring you interviews with professionals in the movement and exercise field. The goal is to provide information for other professionals and also amateur movement aficionados, people who understand that movement is part of what makes life complete. Some of the people we interview you will have heard of. They're well known in and outside of the movement and exercise profession. Others you may not have heard of, but they have a great deal of knowledge to share. Many people doing the best work spend their time working with people, not working on their social media presence. We're going to give you a chance to learn from some of these talented and knowledgeable individuals, and we're going to learn along with you. Moving to Live podcasts are going to be short. Each interview will be long enough to impart usable information, but short enough to be able to be consumed in a single bout, during your workout, commute, or even during dinner prep. We all like long-form interviews, but time is valuable. Moving to Live wants to give you the option to learn and be entertained without needing to commit 60 minutes at a time for an interview. Give Moving to Live a listen. Check out our sister podcast, FitLab PGH, which highlights people, businesses, events, and activities in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area that make movement a priority. Moving to Live would love to hear from you. Want to connect with us or have an idea for somebody you think we ought to interview? Drop us an email, mov2liv@gmail.com, or connect with us on Instagram and Twitter, both _mov2liv. We're excited to bring you these interviews, and we think you'll enjoy each and every one that we bring you. Welcome back to another edition of Moving to Live. Moving to Live, along with our sister podcast, FitLab PGH, believes that movement should be treated as a lifestyle, not just an activity. If you like what you're hearing on Moving to Live, please leave us some feedback on Apple Podcasts or whatever your podcast app is. I've said before that some of the best interviews that I have on Moving to Live come from recommendations from past guests. A big shout out to Commander Sam Brassfield of the United States Navy. I believe the weekend after we're recording this on a Friday, Sam is going to be attempting a 100-mile run after skydiving out of the sky, along with his buddy Justin of Veterans Adventure Group, who we also interviewed. And when Sam first contacted me and said, hey, you ought to interview this guy, Aaron Hale, that I know, he lost his vision in a EOD accident in the military, and then he lost his hearing. My first question was, well, how's that going to work on Zoom? Because Aaron's in Florida and I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Aaron chimed in on Facebook Messenger and said, yeah, let's do this. So Aaron, thank you for taking time. You are the first individual who is blind and deaf that I've interviewed for Moving to Live.
Well, thanks for having me. You're very brave.
I think one of the interesting things, I've looked at your website, and the way I start out with Moving to Live is I ask somebody, you meet somebody in an elevator and they say, you know, who are you? What do you do? What's your 30-second elevator spiel about Aaron Hale?
Okay, I should develop one of those. I'm a former Navy cook and former Army bomb technician that have gone on to climb mountains, whitewater kayak, run ultramarathons, run a online chocolate business, and am now a father of 3 boys, including identical twin infants. So I move a lot.
And my question before we get into more of your story, going from a cook to a EOD guy, is, were you an active kid growing up, or is this something you kind of discovered either in the military or after you got out?
I was always a fan of the outdoors. I grew up with my younger brother and sister in rural Ohio, Northeast Ohio, just outside of Akron. We had about 20 acres, most of that being woods. So, of course, when I was a kid, I went, breaking sticks and running through, climbing trees and falling out of them. Not too far from my home, we also had some climbing rocks and cliffs. So that was where I was most days after school if I wasn't playing football or lacrosse. I think being active was always a part of life. I was never really a competitive athlete, except when it came to being on the football field. However, always loved being outside, hated being cooped up indoors for too long.
And I'm curious, is that one of the reasons why you decided to enter the military, or were there other reasons to say, I want to join the Army?
Well, I first joined the Navy as a cook, and that was, in fact, my entire life until about a month before I joined the Navy, I absolutely knew without a doubt I'd never be in the military. I grew up a happy kid and into a happy teenager, and then I was just it was basically happy-go-lucky, aloof, no real direction, no discipline, no real ambition of any sort. I went to college because that was kind of what I was supposed to do after high school. I had no idea what I was going to do. I picked international business because I loved to travel, and business sounded very general. I joined a fraternity, made it my own little animal house, even though there were really bright guys in that fraternity, that chapter, that were doing great things. But I just wanted to party. And soon enough, I partied my way right out of school. I was first put on academic suspension or academic probation, and then academic suspension, which meant I couldn't go back to another Ohio state school for 5 years because my grades were so bad. That was embarrassing. It was a real kick in the seat, and I knew that I needed to get my act together. So I left school. I moved out to California, where my dad was. I got a couple of jobs, started walking everywhere I went, started eating right, lost that freshman 50. And I soon realized, I was feeling better. I was doing more. I was running on the beach, of course, I was doing all the swimming and bodyboarding and all that kind of stuff. And I was enjoying myself, and I was feeling better, but I wasn't making any money. I was living in California, and the cost of living was just outrageous. So I decided it was time to do something with a serious plan, a goal in mind. So I decided I was going to go back to school, even though I'd burned away a bunch of my tuition. I figured, okay, how am I going to get this tuition back? The military was the answer with the GI Bill. I could go to military for 4 years and get the GI Bill, and I could get out and get back on professional path. However, 14 years later, I'm still in the military and loving my life. So the moving aspect, the physical aspect of the military, didn't really catch on. I was in the Navy, and being a Navy cook, there was not fitness isn't set at a premium all the time. I've heard it called 3 Mile a Year Club, because we take 2 physical fitness tests each with a 1.5 mile, run portion. So literally, some people would run 3 miles in an entire year. But I tried to keep busy. I became the PT coordinator for my unit when I was stationed out in Italy. I would have these guys at the local gym doing water aerobics or whatever I could do to keep them moving. So I still liked to be physically fit, but it wasn't until joining the Army a few years later that, in switching over to explosive ordnance disposal, EOD, and becoming a bomb technician, that it became far more important, because I'd be deploying to inhospitable territories and would have to fight the battle, and I may be asked to, and often was asked to, I had to perform my duties while in a bomb suit in outrageous temperatures and keep my wits about me while working on unexploded ordnance or an IED, and that takes a certain level of physical fitness. So I kept myself and my team, we try to keep ourselves at a peak of our physical fitness.
I'm curious. One of my favorite things about Moving to Live and the sister podcast Fit Lab Pittsburgh is learning more about people. You said you entered the Navy and you were a Navy cook before you transitioned over to the Army, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But before that, when you entered the Navy as a cook, did you have cooking experience in the past, or did you enjoy cooking in the past? And the reason I asked that is when I was in high school, my senior year, there were 8 senior boys sitting in study hall, and the home ec teacher came in and said, "Do you want to take a home ec class? You get to eat." And that literally was where I started enjoying good food. And in no way would I say I'm a chocolatier, but I enjoy cooking. So back from when I was 17 or 18, I enjoyed it. So my 2-part question for you: before you became a cook, is it something you enjoy doing yourself? And do you think that background contributed to developing the chocolate business?
Well, yes and yes. I've been cooking since I could reach over the counter. My folks got divorced when I was about 8 years old. And my mom became a single working mom with 3 kids. So I think as far as early as maybe 3rd grade, I was making lunches for my brother, sister, and myself. And my whole family's got a very creative side to them. My mom's an incredible artist, painter, sketch artist, that kind of stuff. So was my brother. But it runs in the family. My creative gene lies in the kitchen. I love to create terrific flavors and tastes, and it was more, of course, I love the taste and textures and everything that goes with cuisine, but I also enjoyed sharing that with others, giving somebody else that enjoyment, that experience, and then of course later on after my injury. And even before that, it was always a passion. In fact, my last deployment, while I was an EOD technician, we were out in the middle of nowhere, out in the desert, and you can't be switched on all the time. Some guys play video games, some people watch movies, whatever they do to when they're off duty time. I built I was basically playing in the mud behind my my tent, but I actually made Afghan moon dust sun-dried sun-baked bricks, and I made a pizza oven in the back of behind our tent. So I even wrote I think it was King Arthur flour. And I told them what I was doing, and they sent out bags of flour, pizza dough, even one of those pizza stones and the pizza peel, the big flat spatula thing. And I was making fresh baked bread and pizzas for the guys on our little command outpost. And I'd take these things into the talk, the headquarters, and they go, where did you get a loaf of bread? But it was always it's always a passion of mine. So when I was injured, not long after I'd completed my oven, ended to leave it behind. It became therapeutic. I was injured in 2011. I lost my eyesight and became both a public speaker and an outdoor adventure athlete. I really enjoyed it. One of the things was it was out of just sheer fear, terror of being stuck on the couch, stuck indoors, trapped by my injury, by my blindness. So I maybe overcompensated a little bit. I started climbing mountains, whitewater kayaking, running marathons. And then I became a public speaker as well. I was telling my story, trying to inspire others, sharing these experiences. And about 4 years later, I came down with bacterial meningitis, which stole what was left of my hearing that the blast hadn't taken. So I was trapped in my body. There was no input. I couldn't see. I couldn't hear. There was a chance I could get some of my hearing restored with the cochlear implants, which now allow me to talk to you. But it would take over 6 months of healing, surgeries, and tuning in of the cochlear implants before I could hear another human voice. So in that time, it was a very isolating, a very lonely time, just literally trapped. My whole world ended right at the ends of my fingers. It took my vestibular balance, that inner ear sense of balance with it. So I came home in a wheelchair, and the trekking poles, eventually I could get up back on my feet, but I was using the trekking poles that I was climbing mountains with, walking poles. I was using that just to get down to the mailbox and back, and that would be an exhausting experience. So, it was tough, but one thing that I knew I could still do was cook. We were having Thanksgiving, and since I couldn't really travel, we invited friends and family from all over. We had this huge feast, and I started cooking way in advance, like weeks in advance. I was doing stuff, and it was therapeutic for me. Something I found I still could do. I was making cakes and pies and cookies and just freezing them, waiting for the big day. I started making batch after batch of fudge. And definitely one of the big reasons I have to spend so much time on the treadmill. But it was I was having so much fun. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now, Michaela, said she noticed something on me that she hadn't seen in 6 months. It was a smile. I was having a good time, and was excited about Thanksgiving and family coming. I was actually looking forward to tomorrow. So the cooking was definitely therapeutic. I was pouring my emotion into it. I was pouring, spices and nuts, and even some of the liquor from the boot, the liquor cabinet in there. And I was just experimenting. I was having fun. Michaela also noticed that I was making far too much fudge for one family in one holiday. So she started sneaking some of this fudge out the front door. Like, you got to be real stealthy around a blind deaf guy. But she was giving it away. Friends, neighbors, and they started coming back and asking if they could buy some more for baby shower coming up or birthday or something. And of course, the capitalist in me said, well, of course you may. And that's what started. That's this kind of into a snowball of what's now Extraordinary Delights, or EODfudge.com.
We're talking to Aaron Hale of EODfudge.com, who's been telling us how he's moved from I guess we can say this is a less than ideal academic college student. And I'm kind of not really in the same boat as you, but kind of in the same boat as you, because my claim to fame is my first 2 semesters in college were a 2.1 and a 1.889. So maybe I didn't party quite as hard as you did, but like you, I kind of struggled. And my biggest accomplishment was getting a higher GPA my sophomore year, so my dad did not continue to hassle me about my low GPA. I'm interested of a lot of what you said. I want to kind of jump back a few minutes. Cook in the military, a real passion for food from a young age. I could very easily see you be somebody who got out of the military, opened a restaurant, and we'd be reading about you as a highfalutin chef. But you made the decision to transition from one branch of the military to another, and really do even more than 180 degrees and go from cooking to EOD. How did that come about?
It was part dissatisfaction with being a Navy cook. Now, I do love cooking, and I've had I love my time as a sailor and being in the Navy. I was stationed. Half of my time in the Navy was spent in Italy. Unfortunately, at the time, they kind of look at culinary specialist is what I was, as hotel restaurant management. So when I wanted to cook, I love that part of it. But and I actually was, I impressed somebody enough to let me cook for the Admiral, the Sixth Fleet in Gaeta, Italy. The U.S. fleet that covers the Mediterranean and the East Atlantic seaboard. So I got to do some fantastic cooking. Got to travel all over Europe and the Mediterranean. It was an incredible time. But the flip side of that is on shore duty. Culinary specialists, at least at the time, also ran the barracks. So for a few years out of my time in the Navy, I was like the front desk clerk or running trouble call tickets to the public works guys. My first duty station in Naples, Italy was spent mostly escorting the local national Italian plumbers and electricians to barracks rooms and making, basically the maintenance petty officer for the barracks. And yes, every job in the military is important. Everybody plays their role. It wasn't. I wasn't really exercising my potential. I was enjoying my time. I took advantage of every minute I could. I took college courses. I learned Italian. In fact, I learned most of my Italian from these Neapolitan roughnecks. I would just point at things and go, "Come se dice? How do you say this? How do you say that?" And I was learning words for like washer and faucet and electrical outlet, but I was learning Italian. However, I wasn't satisfied with my occupation. And in 2004, when I was cooking for the Admiral and we were out at sea in the Med, both wars were kicking off or in full swing, and we were watching Patriot missiles launch from the decks of these Aegis destroyers, these Aegis cruisers, and going over and turning on CNN and watching them land in Baghdad. And I decided that I wanted to play a more kinetic role, a more direct role in the warfighting, effort. So I first volunteered as an individual augmentee. Basically, I volunteered as a sailor to go fill in Army billets in Afghanistan. Of course, Navy cooks go run chow halls, and I ran a dining facility on a FOB out in Farah, Afghanistan. So I went from cooking for the Admiral and 35 of his staff to cooking for 600-700 ISAF NATO troops, U.S., Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and while it was closer, it was still cooking. And it was great. It was a little irony. A couple of years after leaving Italy and learning Italian, I'm in Afghanistan. I'm speaking Italian to these Italian Special Forces guys. But it was there when I met EOD technicians. And they told me all about their job, told me about the tight-knit brotherhood, the community within the military community. And just that they were first responders. They got to save lives on the battlefield. And that everything about the job, the technical aspect, the everything, it just it clicked for me. That's what I wanted to do. So the Navy and all the branches have EOD technicians. I put in a request to transfer over to EOD, but my rank in as a cook, that job level was undermanned, so they didn't want to lose me. I guess they liked my cooking too much, but and they weren't going to promote me either. So my contract ran out, and it was time for me to either re-enlist or take my, or walk. And I left the Navy and I went over to the Army recruiter, handed him my field jacket, my service record, and I said, I want to go EOD. And the recruiter said, welcome. I got to keep my rank. I went to the EOD school, which is actually a Navy-run school. So it was kind of funny. I was in a different uniform, still feeling like a sailor. And it was pretty funny. I had Navy devices on my Army uniform, so people were giving me some strange looks. But I trained to become an EOD technician, and soon I was deployed to Iraq and then again to Afghanistan in 2011.
I'm curious, if you hadn't had the incident where you lost your sight, do you think you'd still be in the EOD?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I love the job. I loved it then. I love it today. I was doing very important work. I have no idea how many lives my team and my unit saved, but I know it was significant. And I'm proud of the service. The service, we rendered, and I would absolutely love to have a chance to do it again. I would definitely still be doing it.
We're talking with Aaron Hale, who's telling us his story from northeastern Ohio to now in Florida, really serving in two branches of the service, losing his eyesight in one of them. You mentioned a few minutes ago when you got out of the military because of losing your sight, you said, maybe I overcompensated by doing all of these outdoor adventures because I didn't want to be trapped in my body. And I think one of the interesting things that you may have hit on, whether you know it or not, is both with that and also after you lost your hearing, is whether consciously or subconsciously, you made the decision or the understanding that movement was part of your lifestyle. It just wasn't a workout. Were you aware of it as a time, or was it more along the lines of, well, I can do this, so I'm going to do this because it prevents me from just sitting here and doing nothing?
I truly believe, and I think this is best. My own philosophy is best explained by Jocko Willink, who has a terrific book called Extreme Ownership, and we take responsibility for everything. I, of course, couldn't control my blindness. I can't restore my own sight, but I can control how I react and what I do next. So in that sense, I'm no longer a victim. I take back the power that might be, might have been taken from others that have that sense of defeat. So I decided that I wasn't going to sit back and just let the rest of my life pass me by because I couldn't see. If I was going to be blind, I was going to be the best damn blind guy I could be. So I started researching ways to be blind, to do things, to get outside, and that really was one of my fears. Was how was I going to be able to do this or that? How was I going to get out? So I started, I learned how to, I went to it's a blind rehabilitation center. The VA has units all over the United States. And I went to the one in Augusta, Georgia. And part of the training was learning how to use voiceover, the text to speech within my computers, my phone, and other devices. And as soon as I could get on the internet, I was researching, putting in the search blind plus outside, blind plus running, blind plus whatever. And a few names kept popping up. One was a blind man named Eric Weinmeier, who was the first blind person, I think still the only, to ever climb Mount Everest. And you know what? I sought him out. I climbed a mountain with him. And he, on the anniversary of climbing Mount Everest, he took an entire wounded veteran team up a sister summit to Everest called Mount Labouche. And it turned into a program called Soldiers to Summits. And I jumped on to the third iteration of this program. Is Proven Andy's team, and we climbed an 18,000 foot peak in Peru. Kind of through all of that, I met a blind person, another Navy veteran, who was the first blind person to climb, or no, to kayak the entire Grand Canyon, Lonnie Bedwell. And you know what? I sought him out, and I went kayaking with him, and I got myself, kayaking the Yellowstone River, Class 3 rapids, and the running became kind of a byproduct of trying to get ready for the mountains and kayaking. It's, I live in Florida. It's kind of hard to find a decent mountain around here. But I could still run. I could still go up and down stairs. They have some tall condominium buildings here. And I started running. And I would just find running partners, guides, people to run right beside me. And we just hold a tether between us. I started off with just one of those foot-long dog, tug of war ropes. I would hold a knot. My running guide would hold the other knot, and I would just get all my cues right from the rope, and we would just run and chat shoulder to shoulder. And eventually, I was going further distances, and then somebody got in my head that I was talking to another blind veteran, Ivan Castro, who's a big time runner. And he always made it. He always makes it a point to run the Air Force Marathon, the Army 10 miler, and the Marine Corps Marathon every year. I thought that sounds really patriotic. I think I'll do that too. So before having run a single marathon, I'd signed up for all three of those. As somebody, I guess I'm very suggestible, but somebody talked me into running a local marathon. I signed up for the Pensacola Marathon. I don't even know how I got talked into the San Antonio Marathon, but somehow before running my first race, I was signed up for Air Force, Marine Corps, Pensacola, San Antonio, and the Army 10 miler, all within 4 months of each other. And 3 of those races qualified me for Boston. It kind of took off, and it became who I was and what I did. I got outside, and I kept getting things done. And the more of this, this lifestyle that I got, the better I felt, and the more I wanted.
I know it's amazing the variety of people that I interview on Moving2Live who talk about getting outside to move, whether they run, whether they kayak, whether they hike. I know in my interview with our mutual friend, Sam Brassfield, he said that a lot of times in his command jobs, he'll go out and run with his second of command, and they'll basically solve the problems that they were worrying about the previous day. So I think one of the things that a lot of people recognize, I think you've picked up on it, I've picked up on it, but a lot of people don't recognize is being outside. There's something about it that has a positive effect no matter what the activity is that you're doing.
It's, you call it moving to live, and it's so true. The physical fitness aspect of your life isn't just a physical, isn't just about physical health. If you think about it, it's a social aspect. I run with others. Everything in my life now is kind of a team sport, even if it can be done a solitary way. I have somebody to do it with, and well, then I got to coordinate schedules with other people to get my own training done. That's a little thing compared to all the people I get to interact with every time I go out and train. And it can also be a solitary thing where I get on the treadmill or I've got a fairly decent garage gym, and that's my man cave. That's my solitary time. But then it's a mental thing, because of course you're working your body, your blood is pumping, it's thinking time, and you're a sharper person when you're physically fit rather than sedentary. It's a community activity. I mean, there are so many different benefits to getting out and being active. It's not just about your physical health, but everything.
I think that's very well said. We're talking with Aaron Hale. He's telling us his story. You've given a really inspiring talk about the benefits of moving and how you continued to move after you lost your eyesight. But then you kind of had another kick in the pants. I think you said 4 years after your eyesight, you contracted meningitis and lost your hearing. Was there a thought period during that time that's like, okay, this is it, I can't do this again? Or was it kind of like, okay, this is another hurdle that I have to jump over?
Absolutely. I mean, yes. Just after the meningitis, I mean, I was put in the hospital again. It nearly killed me. My family really thought that this was going to be the end. But the doctors pulled me through. However, either the meningitis or the heavy doses of antibiotics had stolen what was left of the hearing that the blast hadn't taken. And I was sitting the kitchen breakfast bar on the stool, just thinking, why me? What if those demons try to creep into my head? And starting to feel sorry for myself, trying to think, when is this soldier paid his dues? When has one person had enough? And it just is really self-defeating attitude. I not built that way. I began to think it was actually a little embarrassing to catch myself thinking that way after 4 years of speaking in front of crowds, standing in front of crowds and talking about looking at the bright side, about success through struggle, looking forward to hardship for how strong it can make you, how much better you can be after, through having endured and encouraged the hardship to actually look forward to it. And here I was feeling sorry for myself because it was going to be hard. I'd lost something again. So I did the metaphoric slap in the face, and thankfully I have some amazing family to support me. And even though I started off in the wheelchair and I got to the trekking poles, and I was walking around with like a quadruped, I got onto my treadmill and I would hold on to the stability bars with like an iron grip, and I would just hit the quick start, and it would the treadmill would start at 0.5 miles an hour, and I would just walk. And then I would hit the up arrow, one beep, and now I was going a mile an hour. And that's how I started training again. And eventually I was jogging, still holding on with both hands. And within a year of contracting meningitis, I registered for my first marathon back, was the 2016 Akron Marathon, which is my hometown. And it was the same week as my 20th high school reunion. And even though it was probably the hardest 26.2 miles I'd ever run, I finally beat I finally got a sub 4 marathon, which is a PR for me. It still stands. I'd proven that I could come back. I could do just about anything. I proved to myself that I wasn't full of it. That there is there is a silver lining to everything. That there is truth to that. It's strength through struggle, and I just had to prove it to myself one more time.
We're talking with Aaron Hale. I think one of the things you've hit on a number of times is you took responsibility. I think it was John Kennedy who said life isn't fair, and it isn't fair. It's kind of sometimes people get things that happen that are not fair. I think one of the things that you've hit on that I've really enjoyed is you kind of said, well, what can I do? And I think that's something that a lot of people can take away from this. We're talking with Aaron Hale. I think one of the things that the listener should be aware of is, in addition to not having your sight and not hearing, we're doing this conversation using technology, and it's working extremely smoothly. I'm very impressed with the technology, and you're willing to do this. And I think one of the things when talking about movement as a lifestyle, you're not done moving. You're planning on doing a 100-mile race coming up, and then hopefully a 135-mile-an-hour race. Or excuse me, 135-mile race, not hour race. It might take 135 hours. I've always done endurance activities with kind of the effect of I finish something and it's kind of like, okay, that was fun. What else can I do next? Or what can I do differently? Is that kind of the path you're taking, or do these two specific events that you have planned to do at some point in time, one of them coming up, something that they have special meaning to you?
Well, having gone through the blindness, the bomb blast, and the meningitis, and the hearing loss, and all of that, I've certainly learned about the fragility of life, and our own mortality, and to start that. Start checking off things on that bucket list right now. Don't wait. It's not, someday, I'll get to it someday. That never, ever happens. So because I love running and I love challenging myself, it's been about a year and a half ago, I ran my first ultra marathon, which is it was actually a 12-hour race. And it was a loop. And I made it 50.2 miles, and it was difficult. It was miserable, but I loved it. In fact, it's so funny. Whether it's a marathon or a mountain, it's like every during the days leading up to it and the days just after, I can't wait for the next one. While in the middle of it, I'm thinking, what was I thinking? Never again. But of course, I'm always looking for the next challenge, the next mountain, the next race, and I want to challenge myself for a longer distance. So coming this May, I'll be running the Keys 100, and hopefully raising a few dollars for the EOD Warrior Foundation. It's a hot one. It's a good precursor to another goal, which is to run the Badwater 135, which they call the most grueling foot race on earth. So I'm looking forward to it.
I think one of the things, I've got a friend of mine who's retired after being in academia, and he's still checking things off the bucket list. And I think whatever the situation is in life, if you always think, what can I look forward to? What's something that I enjoy doing? And I think one of the things that so many of the people that I've interviewed on Moving to Live have picked up on, whether they're elite athletes or whether they're back at the Packers like I am, just getting out and moving. I think you've done a phenomenal job of explaining how that really helps, not a substitute for counseling or dealing with problems that people might have, but just an adjunct to making life just a lot more fun.
Well, I always think of a quote I heard that Ray Kroc from McDonald's. He was talking about business, but he said, "You're either green and you're growing, or you're brown and dying." And I think about that when in my own personal growth, in my own physical fitness, or in our business. I think we got to continue to build on successes. We got to keep working. Or, for me, I know that if I'm not constantly working on challenging myself on my physical fitness, if I'm not trying to build and do better, if I stop for a moment, I start feeling the wheels fall off. It's the physical erosion happens so fast. So I've got to do it, not just because I'm drawn to do it, but I really do need to.
I think that's a message we can all take. We're going to have extensive show notes. I have to confess, while listening to Aaron, I got on his website and ordered a pound of chocolate. So now I'm going to have to keep on moving so that the chocolate doesn't get added to my waistline. Aaron, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to Moving to Live. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And once again, a big shout out to Sam Brassfield for suggesting you. Some of the best interviews you get are people saying, "Hey, you need to talk to this buddy of mine."
Well, thank you very much. And I'm just as happy that Sam had introduced us.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Moving to Live. Make sure you check out the show notes for contact information for our latest guest, as well as links about all the things we talked about. Intro and exit music is Traveling Light by Jason Shaw. You can subscribe to Moving to Live on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play, and be notified about new episode releases. Have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Drop us an email, mov2liv@gmail.com. Connect with us on Twitter or Instagram, both _MOV2LIV. Please tell your friends about Moving to Live. It's a go-to place for information for movement and exercise professionals and amateur aficionados who understand that movement is part of what makes your life complete. Until next week, keep on moving.